and welcome to this next session. The speaker that we're about to hear from, if I could take a year off my own projects and follow him around the world and learn from him, this would be the person. Dr. Itiel Dror is a cognitive neuroscientist. He has got a PhD from Harvard University. He has published dozens of peer-reviewed articles. And he also works with some of the biggest global organizations and governmental bodies. What I'm most excited about in the next 70 minutes, hopefully we'll keep it to 70 minutes, is that he's going to take some of the most theoretical understanding of the brain, of the mind, and of cognition, and he's going to translate it into practical understanding that we can really apply to human performance. So sit back, relax, and I think that we're all going to leave this room with a spring in our step. Thank you, Itiel Dror.
Thank you, Celine. I'm very happy to be here. I will keep to 70 minutes. It's going to be a challenge. I'm going to cover a lot of materials. But if you want to stop me, if you have any questions, I welcome interruptions. I'm going to try to leave time in the end for questions, but I may not have time. But you're welcome to email me. Also, if you want copies of the slides, I'm happy to share them. So you can email me, and I put a lot of the literature on the website. So I'm talking today about learning and the mind. Creating learning involves a host of conflicting tensions and paradoxes. And I probably should start up and say I don't want to talk about learning, but I want to talk about relearning. And I may have to be careful what I say because I'm recording, but we know that most of the learning that happens, people are not learning. They're learning, but they're not learning what we want them to learn. They learn metacognitive skills. Rather than saying that you're not learning, I'll talk about myself. I do a lot of research with human subjects, and I have to have a certificate and a license. And every 2 years, I have training I need to go by. And what I learn is how to play the game, right? I don't learn every 2 years. I'm an expert how to get exactly 80% correct, which I need, not learn anything of the content, but how to answer the questions, how to second guess what they want to hear. And that's what happens in university, in commercial companies. We're not necessarily talking about people really learning. Yes, we give them certificates and they do quizzes, but we don't really know, or we know that a day later, half of them would not pass a quiz that they got 24 hours earlier. A week later, they remember very, very little. A month later, they don't even remember what you're talking about. And those who remember don't necessarily apply it. It doesn't modify behavior. It doesn't impact what they do back at the workplace. So I want to talk about real deep learning. And when we do that, we find quite a lot of problems. We want to be very specific and very practical to enhance learning, to do real deep learning. But if you want it to do that, and be careful what you want to do, because a lot of the learning, the consumers are happy. They give you a high score, great learning. Doesn't mean necessarily very much in terms of what they've learned. It needs to fit the human brain. We need to understand the brain and translate it to how we do things. How does the human brain perceives information? How it encodes? How does it remember? What governs decision-making, behavior? How we can work with it? And I'm going to start today to provide you some tools that you can apply in a wide range of situations. And I want to be very practical, but I want to talk about the theory. And as you can guess, it takes more than an hour, 70 minutes, to explain the brain and how to apply it and to give you tools. So today we're taking the first step in this journey that you may or may not want to start walking after my talk today. So I assume there are people in the audience, you develop training, you deliver training, everybody's happy. But do people actually do what you want them? Even if you very clearly have instructions what you want the learners to do they actually follow what you wanted them to do? And I'm not even talking about the deep level. Is it motivating? Is it engaging? But do that people who do your stuff, you tell them what they want to do, and they don't do it. Now, even if they do it, they may do it and do exactly what you wanted. They may not necessarily get out of it what you hoped and planned for them to get out of it. Even if they do that, are they going to remember it? And even if they're going to remember it, are they going to act on it back at the workplace, whether it's soft skills or hard skills or compliance or whatever you're training them? Now, once you know and understand the factors that influence and determine when people follow, when they don't follow, what they get out of it, what they remember, then you can really start to control and manage these factors to make the learning effectively and brain-friendly. So relearning, step number one, it's not what you teach, but what they learn that counts. That's the title of one of my papers. It's a huge change in perspective because I work with a lot of companies, and they show me great training, and they say, we develop the training, whether it's e-learning, whether it's face-to-face, and now it's up to the learner to learn. If they don't learn, it's their problem. It's not my problem. I come ready. I have great slides, and if you're not listening, then it's got nothing to do with me. No. It's what you teach and how beautiful the pages and the slides and the interactive videos and the gaming means nothing. All that matters is what do they actually learn. So forget when you're talking and evaluating your modules how great they are. At the end of the day, it's what they learn. And in this perspective, there are three things. Number one, that everybody spends a lot of time. They have to acquire something. There's an input. They learn knowledge. They learn a skill, EPOS, electronic operating machines, TILs, if you're teaching them, or health and safety, or diversity, or customer service. So they need to learn or to build something or to operate a machinery, whatever. There needs to be an input that gets into the brain. Number two, we'd like them to remember it. No use if it goes in one ear and out the other ear. And to apply it back in the real world, whatever the real world is. This is what I talk about relearning, trying to understand those factors and what actually drives people, what actually drives decision-making and skill acquisition, kind of go backwards, how are we going to create those mental representations in the brain? Because if it doesn't fit the brain, then you're wasting time. You're putting gas in neutral. It's like nailing a jelly to the tree. So much effort, so much frustration, and you're not hitting the target. And there are many approaches to that. So I'll ask you some questions that I don't think, I'm in England, I say it in a British polite way, I don't think most of you are going to be able to answer. So when you develop a training using technology or not, what parts of the brain are you targeting? How do you engage? What are the characteristics of those area parts to make you be able to enter them? And how do you multiply and engage different parts of the brain in a harmonic way to optimize the learning? And we can go on and on in many questions like that. And this is what I talk about when I talk a cognitive neuroscience approach. We want to maximize our knowledge of the brain to enhance learning effectiveness. Now, you don't have to be a cognitive neuroscientist and get a PhD and study the brain for 30 years. I'll give you some principles today and apply them that you can go back even in 1 hour and change your perspective if you want to do so. So good so far, but there's a problem because when you get into the brain, no wonder people don't want to really do effective learning. There are inherent paradoxes. The great paradox of learning, I haven't written it up yet, but I will when I have time, probably never. There's a basic paradox in learning. I'll tell you it right now. First of all, people are busy. There's a lot of information going on. The brain is busy. It can't compute everything. And this is when you give it and you're trying to train people and they're learning, you give them a lot of information. Now, in addition to that, they're getting texts, they're getting emails, their wife is sick, their dad has Alzheimer's, there's a virus going on, their mortgage is not paid, their wife is cheating on them, they're getting a divorce, their car is broken, and I'm happy that only 1 or 2 people are laughing, so most of the people know what I'm talking about. and the people who are laughing who have no problems in their life, I hope it will continue, but sooner or later people are sick, the parents are sick, the kids are sick, they have financial problems. So the brain is occupied with a lot of stuff. And if you give them learning, they don't want to learn, and they're busy, most of them. And even if they're highly motivated, like Air Force pilots are very motivated in training, even there is too much information, and the brain ignores most of it. So to get into the brain, what we call cognitive penetrability, you need to do something unusual, something weird. The brain ignores the normal. The normal is boring, and the brain doesn't notice. Even if they're looking at the screen, they don't see it. And I'm going to do it to you in a few minutes, okay? And I tell you in advance, I'm going to put things on the screen, and your brain is going to ignore them. And I pay people money, and they don't see it. The brain doesn't like the normal. The brain pays attention to grab something. You have to do a surprise, something different, unusual, to get into the brain. But once it's in the brain, you want it to be integrated, consolidated with existing knowledge. So it has to be very similar and familiar. So to get into the brain, it has to be unusual. And if it's unusual, it's very hard for it to integrate itself into the memory structure and the existing knowledge, because it has to be connected in existing associations. So it's a paradox. If you do normal stuff that is easy to integrate, it doesn't get into the brain. If you get into the brain, it's so weird and unusual that the brain doesn't consolidate it to existing knowledge. So there's inherent conflicts and paradoxes. So this doing it brain-friendly is a headache, which I love to do. You may not like to do, but this is kind of what I'm talking about, learning and the mind, and thinking about the brain and what is going on in the brain. So there's a lot of talk about the brain. The brain is very, very popular these days. And I just walked down in the exhibit this morning, so many exhibitors, brain-friendly, cognitive effective, area 9, they have pictures of the brain. And I didn't want to give them too much of a hard time, but I talked to them, and it's in many domains. They don't know much about the brain. It's all brain babble. It used to be psychobabble, now there's brain babble. And even if they do know a bit about the brain, the name of the game, the complexity, is to translate the knowledge about the brain. What does it mean practically in developing effective technology, learning, and enhancing it? So there's a lot of talk about the brain, and what I look at is cognitive neuroscience. So we look at the mechanisms in the brain of processing information, and the brain processes a lot of information. The blue bars is what we hear, what we see. That's the input. But when it gets into the brain starts to filter it and change it and encode it, and a lot of manipulation. We do get things in the brain, the input, what we call bottom-up information. It gets into the brain. The eye is quite primitive. The ears are quite primitive. They just convey the information to the brain. But then we have what's in the brain already. We call it top-down processing. And it's your knowledge, your skill, your experience, your personality, your temperament, what you've studied. Everything about you and everything that ever happened to you is already in the brain. And we have these bottom-up things coming in, and what's in the brain, and these two interact together in order for us to learn. The mechanisms of what we see, the information, the bottom-up information, the blue ball doesn't determine what we learn, because it matters what the brain does with it based on the mechanisms and the knowledge in the brain. And to make it simple, I like to talk about bottom-up. Information arriving from the retina is processed, or the ear or the nose or whatever. But then you have the top-down component, where what happened is existing knowledge is used to guide information processing. It's a good mechanism. We weren't born yesterday. We don't take information in face value. The human mind is not a camera, and we treat our learners like a camera. You know, they sit in front of the screen, and they do our e-learning, and they're like recording like a tape recorder. That's a very naive and ill-informed. The human mind is not a camera. The brain has top-down mechanisms that govern what happens there. And the machine, our brain, if I haven't said enough already, is limited. Our brain is limited. It has limited computational capacity to process information. And we get all this information only in the learning. I'm putting aside everything else that's going on in people's head. All of this gets into the brain, and it's very hard to process. For example, between the coffee bean, do you see a face? There's a lot of information. It's very hard, but there's a face right here. There's a face. This is too much information for the brain to compute. And most of the learning, and I spend a lot of time reviewing learning provided by commercial companies and others, and you are unfair to the learners. You put too much cognitive load on them. They can't take the load like an ass in the air, basically. That's what you do to your learners, okay? They have so much load, they cannot take it. I like presentations. People don't learn. I showed it to you. You know, it was there. Well, the fact that you present doesn't mean they take it on board. Let me give you one more example. I'm going to put something on the screen, and I want you to count how many times you see the letter F on the screen here. Please listen to my questions. Don't second guess what I'm going to ask. How many people don't see any Fs? Okay, good start. Pick your hand up if you see the 3 Fs. Pick your hand up high. About half of you, 4 Fs. Did I put the right slide? Because I'm counting 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are you blind? Are you stupid? This is not too much information. It's not like the coffee beans, right? 6 is a small number. I hope nobody's going to accuse me of putting a small font of F, right? This is font 152. I couldn't make it any bigger. I gave you time. And we pay students 10 pounds for every F they can count. They make 30, 40 pounds. Almost nobody makes 60 pounds when we do that. Because the fact that you put it in front of somebody's face and you ask them and you pay the money and people are really motivated here, and sometimes they have small workshop, they have to say how many Fs and they look on it for 10 minutes. Doesn't matter, the brain doesn't take that information on board. And don't get angry because people don't do 6 Fs. And I wish I would have time to tell you why you don't see the 6 F. Actually, you see it. The eye sees it and gives it to the brain. The brain ignores it. And you do it without awareness. You don't intentionally say, oh, I'm busy on my phone texting or email and I'm not paying attention, which is what I do when I do all the e-learning modules that I have to do, health and safety. You know, from time to time I click. I'm not. But even if you look and you're motivated, it doesn't matter. You have to understand the cognitive perspective. And this is critical, of course, in terms of learning. If you ignore that and you give the 6 F, that means nothing to people. And it's because of the top-down processes, existing knowledge, something about this, which I'd love to tell you. If we have time, you can ask questions in the end. Guides information processing, and the human mind doesn't take it accurately. Let me give you one more example, because when I said it doesn't matter what you tell them, what they learn, people are a bit skeptical. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to redeem yourself in the 6 F. I'm going to give you a puzzle, a murder puzzle, and see if you can solve the puzzle.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
That's right, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
So I don't know how many of you solved the murder, but did you notice any changes? Pick up your hand. How many changes did you notice? People chose 1, 2. Everything changed. There was nothing there That's the same, 21 changes. It starts with a gray coat, it moves to a white coat. The guy that's murdered is different. The rug changes, the pictures on the wall change, the flower changes. There's nothing the same. Everything changes. I'll play it again, and you will see for yourself, everything changes, and people notice one or two. Some people don't notice at all. 21 changes. So now you can see how everything changes. And not side things. All the big things will change.
Action. Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Well, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
And if you're familiar with the gorilla example, there's many other examples. There's information selectivity that the brain cannot take all the information on board, and it gets complicated. What are the implications for technology-enhanced learning so that the people who we want to teach, the people are learners, how do we cognitive penetrability, how do we get into the brain, get into their brain and get the information? And it's not only the selectivity, but it's a human mind, as I mentioned, is not a camera. We're very active. There are issues of mental representations and a lot of issues, that have implications to training that I just don't have time to talk about in terms of how we learn it and what we can do with it later. I'll give you one more example. I bet that nobody here can tell me the months of the year, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December by alphabetical order. Anybody want to try? You want 20 pounds? I'll give you 20 pounds for it. You want to give it a go?
Yes.
Okay, 20 pounds. Nobody help him, because then you'll pay the... No, don't write them down. No writing down. Do you still want to try it?
Yeah.
What's your name?
Conrado.
If you know a yes minister, it's a very brave decision you're taking. Okay, go ahead.
April.
April, good.
August.
August, very good. 2 down, 10 to go.
And I speak Portuguese, so I'm doing the translation. And
I'll give you 40 pounds if you do it for extra.
50?
No, 50 is too much. I need to eat lunch. Don't push your luck.
February?
Miss December. What is your name?
Conrad.
Conrad. I've been a bit unfair because people can't do that. The only people who can do it, and you had a chance, is before the coronavirus, when I was in China and I did it, they were able to do it. Children can do it, but children cannot say January, February, March, April. They go January, February. And you encode the mental representation, you have it by chronological order, and you have a mental representation that prevents you from modifying. It's not a flexible mental representation. So many times you can teach people really quickly, they learn, but the mental representation is not elastic. It means it doesn't transfer, and it's not flexible. They can do it like idiots very well, but if you train them and now something small changed in their application environment, you have to train them again, because it doesn't transfer to a whole range of situations. That's a function of mental representations. How they can use it, if they can use it, how flexible it is again a function of mental representation. This one is called chunking, and there are many. And the reason we can't do it is because of mental representations. And mental representations are a function of the limited resources of the brain. That's also why the brain is active. The brain is active. The human mind is not a camera, because there's limited resources, so it has to be active to process information. It selects information because of that. And all of this has implications. It's all tied in to learning one another. And as you can see, it gets very, very interesting, but very, very complicated. And you can see many times something like this. And if you don't do it later, Conrad, you didn't pay attention. Row number 5, 9.6, and you did something, and I taught you, I showed it in my presentation. Showing it, presenting data, doesn't mean the person observing the brain takes it. Even if they're highly motivated for 40 or 50 pounds, even if they're intelligent, like Conrad is super intelligent, and even if they're motivated, so much information, right? You need to reduce the load, and the first step, which is kind of the minimum of the minimum, is what I call a quantitative approach, is to reduce the amount of information. But that's not necessarily enough, because 6 is not a lot, and we ignored the sum of the 6 F's. But this is the first thing you need to do. Go over when you do stuff and think to take it down. Whatever you're doing, probably it's too much. But sometimes you have to do, I've been working with big companies, they have regulations. They have to, for legal reasons, train people. The fact that nobody learns, they're sorry, but if they don't do it, they can be sued. So the first is the quantitative. Just take down the quantitative. The more interesting one that I like to talk about, and I'll show you as much as time will permit, is a qualitative approach. A qualitative approach is much more difficult, because the qualitative approach, it says, I'm not going to reduce the amount of information. I'm going to package it in a more brain-friendly way, so the brain can take it. The brain can take a lot of information if you present it in a certain way that the brain likes, so it doesn't have to transform. You don't see the information. The brain has to compute it. The brain has to change it and encode it. You give it to the brain ready-made, already comes in. And there's a lot of things that we can do by reducing the load without reducing the amount of information, just presenting it in a more brain-friendly way. Most of the time when I evaluate e-learning modules, I spend most of my limited brain figuring out what the hell they want me to do. Not even learning. So much energy doesn't go on the learning material. It goes on the things before and the things after. Even if we get that out of the way, the information itself can be packed effectively. You have a figure like this, very brain difficult. Go figure out what they're saying here. Now, I'm not saying you can't. How long it is going to take you, and how much brain calories are you going to burn? You're going to burn a lot of brain calories on this. But I can make it much simpler by changing the axis. And now you can see, if you look at the figure, that every year older people vote more than younger people, except 1 year, 1980. You can see it here, but the brain couldn't see it among the lines, that 1980 is different. On the right, it is easy for the brain to see the information. On the left, difficult / almost impossible. Here's an example. You'll say, what is wrong with this? Many scientific articles and real nice, posh, gloss paper, pamphlet have things like this on the left. I can definitely, the United States is the biggest, then Japan and Europe are about the same. And you can add color or whatever. You can carry this, you can do it, but you're burning calories you don't need to burn, because what I need to do, I have to remember white. My brain has to remember white. I go here, white is the United States, and I have to go back. That's 4 or 5 steps. I can just put it in here. Whichever it is, I put it in the wrong places, which shows you how confused I am, and jet lag. But here, on the right, is a much more effective representation, even though you can figure the one on the left, because it's written there. Why do you have to go back and forth? I never have legends on my graphs. I have a line. I put next to the line. Smart people, left-handed, right-handed, before the operation, after the operation, rather than having a legend to look at it. It's a matter of helping the brain. And it's your problem, the people who deliver, the people who design and use, and technology is so helpful to help the learner not to throw things by reducing the load. And you can reduce the load by the quantitative, just take down the information, everything. What's going to happen? Do you know the game Jenga? Pull information out of the learning. If I pull this out, will it collapse? No. Will I pull out as much of the information from your training and either a critical part, or if I take this out, the training is a waste of time. What do you really have to be there? That is a quantitative, and a qualitative, just be clever by packaging it. But you can do much more. For example, this is a project I've done with the Air Force. Pilots have to identify aircrafts. The top, I have to remember where I'm talking, the top is friendly, the bottom is an enemy one, okay? Now this aircraft is very critical to learn whether to shoot or not to shoot, whether enemy or friendly ally forces. And the planes are very similar. It's very hard to learn. And remember, then they're in action, right? You're all fired up, you may die, you're in a combat, you have to make decisions to shoot, not to shoot, and people shoot our own forces because they misidentify aircraft. And you train them and train them and train them, and then they learn how to do it. We have to think, how do they learn how to do it? Why can't they do it initially and after they have exposure and exposure and exposure? How do they learn? How many of you know identical twins? Pick your hands up. So many of you, identical twins, the first time you see them, they're identical. You have no idea who is David and who is John. And after you see them again and again and again, after X number of time, they look very different. You see them and you know this is John and this is David right away, right? What happened? Suddenly they look different? No, they look exactly the same. What happened? Without your awareness, your brain figured out what is the difference between them. John, his right nostril is bigger than his left one. And the brain sees and picks it up. And you're not aware, the brain picks up on the distinctive features. You know, I'm not racist. I went to Japan. All the Japanese look the same. I was doing research for 3 months in the Brain Research Institute. After 3 weeks, they looked very different. What has changed? The Japanese people didn't change. My brain changed because the facial features that distinguish between Japanese are certain facial features, and what distinguishes white people is different. And my brain, being exposed to white people, pays attention to the distinguishing features between white people, which are very similar with the Japanese, and my brain learned what to pay attention to. This is called the other race effect. You can Google it. There are hundreds of articles on that. So the same here, the brain learns over time not to pay attention to the nose of the aircraft because they're identical. They learn that the F-15E model, for example, has a unique feature that distinguishes the air taker is 90 degrees. So why not help the brain learn and doing training transform? We have a paper, this is unclassified, helping the cognitive system learn, exaggerating distinctiveness and uniqueness. So why don't we help and facilitate the brain to guide attention to the important places? So in doing training, it is important to help them. We exaggerate, we distort reality. I give a lot of talks in the medical domain, in medical simulation conferences. The exhibit here is very impressive, but the medical one, you won't believe it. And all of them do medical simulation, and they say, real like medical emoji. No, you want to distort, use e-learning to distort, to help pay attention and exaggerate the intaker so the brain more carefully picks up on it, more fast, and has a better salient mental representation by distorting the information. When we meet people, Conrad, I meet Conrad, I look at his eyes, he looks at my eyes. Police officers, when they come to an active crime scene, don't look at the eyes, look at the hands. Does the person have a knife? Does the person have a gun? So they have to direct their attention differently. So rather than them figuring it out, we can train them in a way that makes it more and more effective. We have, in B&Q, I did projects, so they have a new EPOS, electronic point selling machine, a fancy name for the till, how to operate the till, or they have a new combi boiler. Rather than giving the information, which I did, I say, emphasize what are the big differences. in the new system relative to the old system. Don't have the learners figuring it out. You as the expert, you know the new TIL is very similar to the old one, except F1 is on the right side instead of on the left side. Then make the F1 red and big and exaggerated. The brain picks on it. The learning is faster, and the mental representation is more effective. And we measure it because when they go to a real combat, then the air taker is not bigger. When they use a real TIL, it's not bigger, it's the same. And we test in air-to-air combat simulators, we test people in the stores, and even the real life, they get much faster, they operate better on the training that exaggerates what the learner is learning, and they also learn faster. So you can guide attention. But it's always a dangerous game by guiding attention, because you want to guide attention correctly. First of all, you need to know and start asking, what do you really want them to learn? Don't just say, oh, you really have to have a deep understanding what you want them to learn. And then they do real nice training that people love, but she's looking at me. She likes me. That's what I'm paying attention to. I'm not paying attention to the learning, right? Oh, she's really nice. But am I learning what I'm supposed to learn? And many people do feedback. They want beautiful pictures. I like boring, gender-neutral pictures. I want them to pay attention to what they need to learn. And many times I have fights with our corporate police. You know, we have to have certain colors and certain things. But many times, oh, this learning looks beautiful. It doesn't help the learning. In fact, I won't mention which company, they had such beautiful slides and so beautiful gaming and interactions. It was great fun, but it not only didn't help the learning, it detracted from the learning. They damaged the learning by making it really beautiful and nice pictures. Why do you put this picture? How is that going to engage? How is that going to help the learning? It's good to be interactive, but you have to use interactive in a way that helps the learning. So I put the donkey, the ass in the air with the load. Everybody laughs. But that's what people remember. A year later, they remember, didn't you put the ass in the air? So I said, yes. Why did I? And if they say, I don't remember, but it was great fun, I failed. Even though they give me a great ranking because they had a great time. But they didn't learn that I'm a failure. I'm a success if they say, oh, my God, yeah, the ass in the air, cognitive load. Score a point. If you go home and do the months of the year and remember it and you try to, then you have to embed. It has to be interactive. You have to draw attention, but you have to do it in an effective way that promotes the learning. So how much can we put on? The important questions. How can we reduce the load is an important question. Can we help guide attention is important questions. But, first of all, do you even engage them? If not, you're doomed to failure. This is advanced questions because most of the time they're not even paying attention to what you're trying to teach them, whether the cognitive load is good or not, and whether you guys are. They're not engaged in the training. Some people are very motivated. They work a lot in police and Air Force, and people are highly motivated. Often the learners are not, and even when they're motivated, they don't take it on board. And if they're not engaged, you're wasting time. I'm not talking about the poor horse trying to teach a horse to learn something. Us, we're sweating, beating a horse. Look at the frustration of this guy hitting the horse, and the horse is not moving. And remember, I'm talking about relearning, not only acquiring information, but also remembering it and impacting behavior, changing behavior that may be ingrained in people for a long time. We want to change the culture. We want to change the organization. Let me give you a few examples, and maybe I won't. I'll finish on time, but I may not have time for questions. I want to. So this is work I do in the medical domain. This is in the United States, in Mass General Hospital, the biggest hospital in the United States. It's always ranked in the top 5. Fascinating. I work with NHS, Education England, doing a workshop with them very soon. This is 70 operating rooms in parallel. You know, this is a huge machine. And I work in Australia and many other countries, and they have certain problems. So for example, even before the coronavirus, we need people to wash their hands or to use Calstat, a disinfectant. And they have, on the lift, on the door of the lift or the elevators, they have, don't let germs take you down, and a nice picture, real beautiful. But it sounds great, but it's a waste of time. People don't do it, even if it's in a visible place. And we take measurements. We have all the machines all around the lift and the corridor, and we have video cameras, how many times they're used, and we do it before this, and we put it on the lift. And people don't wash their hands more. So why not do something about it? Make it cognitive penetrability. People are going to the hospital. You're visiting your dying mother. Your son is in intensive care unit. You're going to have some corona test. Maybe you're sick. I don't know, you're in the hospital. You're not paying attention and you're on your phone. I don't need to tell you. We're all in the same boat. So why not make it cognitively effective? So there are different ways to do it. First of all, why not put germs in red? Why not say germs kill? Danger, germs, right? There's a lot of things that we can do, right? Make sure it's in eye level, the red there. Put some nice pictures up there. Put something that gets to people. Small changes like that, suddenly people start doing that. Not a big change in the budget or whatever. Small, make it cognitively friendly. This is just an example. This is number one. Number two is don't do the same on every lift, because the brain ignores. One time have it in red, one time have one picture, one time when I have this, one time have the hands, one time have the monsters. Every time have it a bit different, because the brain notices the change, the difference. If it's a normal, it's like the F. They say it the first day they all wash their hands. After 2 days, they don't. So try to do it differently in different places, make some change. Cognitive penetrability, so people engage. If not, they don't engage. They don't remember it. It needs to be in the brain. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be transferable and flexible, like the month of the year, and to generalize by creating the right mental representations. Make them salient and flexible. If the mental representations are not salient, they're not used. If they're not flexible, you can use them in a very limited way. You want to train them in a way that they can apply it in many, many different domains. Are you all with me? Because I'm going super speed. The shoemaker is barefoot. I talk about cognitive load, and I'm loading all you. So I hope your ass is not in the air, and I'm trying to deliver it in a cognitive-friendly way. I cover a lot of information. Hopefully, you're taking this on board. And again, the articles are on my webpage. So we want people to remember. I want to try something. Let's test your memory. How many of you all have a pen and paper? If you don't have a pen and paper, pick your hand up. Ooh. Can you share with one another? I have paper to share. Does anybody need paper? I don't have enough pens, but I have paper. Anybody needs paper? Pen. There used to be in the front lots of pens, I don't think. No more pens. Does anybody want paper? Okay. So if you don't have a pen and a paper, then stand in the corner. It will be only 2 minutes. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, don't write, put your pens down. I'm going to put a list on the screen of items, and I want you, when I'm done, and say now, not before, to write down as many items as you can. The list will appear here, and I will read it out, but I will have it up here to make sure you understand what I'm saying. Okay. Sour, nice, candy, honey, sugar, soda, bitter, chocolate, good, heart, taste, cake, tooth, tart, and pie. Go for it. Write down as many as you can. Fifteen more seconds. Ten seconds. Last chance. Okay, how many did you remember? Pick up your hand if you remembered 5 or less. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more. Okay, interesting. I'm going to give you another list, a different list, and see if you can do better than you did last time, okay? And the list will appear on, I'll put it up here. So we have happy, hate, fight, rage, mad, wrath, fury, calm, eerie, emotion, enrage, fear, hatred, tempered, and mean. Okay, go for it. Twenty seconds. Fifteen seconds. Last opportunity. Can you remember one more word, maybe? Okay, how many now remembered 5 or less? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more? Okay, now if you compare the two lists, which one did you do better in the two lists? Who did better on the first list? Who did better on the second list? Did anybody get exactly the same number? Okay, now if you look at your first list, did you remember the word sweet? Pick up your hand if you remember the word sweet. About half of you. Look at the second list. Did you remember anger or angry? Again, about a third of you. Well, neither appeared on either one of the lists. It doesn't matter what you give people in terms of what they remember later. The human mind is not a camera when you present information. And again, I'm not going to go into the mechanisms, but again, you're treating memory, and if we had time, I would show the lack of correlation between confidence and accuracy. I would ask you, in a big group, it's not a whole day workshop, to write down how confident are you on each one of those words, and you will find people very confident and wrong. Or people low confidence, and they're correct that the word appears. There's very little correlation between confidence and accuracy. So not only the human mind is not a camera, but our awareness of what we know, what we don't know, all the metacognitive are problematic. So you want people to remember, we're talking about memory, and we want people to apply. And to apply, it has to impact. And to impact, the memory has to be connected, consolidated with existing associations in the brain for us to change. But to do that, we'll never get to that stage because in stage number 1, the acquire, if it's familiar and can be consolidated, they will not pay attention to it. To pay attention to it, we have to do something so unusual so the brain notices it will not be encoded in memory or impact necessarily. Let me try one more thing. It will be a bit of a juggling act here. I'm going to have 3 cups here. And I always ask for a volunteer, but Conrad, my friend here, was really good to volunteer in the beginning. Are the cups still standing? More or less. Okay, Conrad, are you here? There's a cup on the right, a cup on the center, and a cup on the left. And I'm going to put money. €5 good? Good. I'm going to put 5 pounds, not euro. Even better, right? I'm going to put 5 pounds in one of the cups. And I'll tell you the rules of the game, and then you tell me if you want to play with me or not, okay? Not necessarily. Because I was unfair in my previous game, and I'm not going to be fair in this game too. I'm going to put it one of the cups, and you need to guess in which cup it is, okay? If you guess correctly, I'm going to give you the 5 pounds. If you guess incorrectly, nothing is going to happen. You can't lose the money. You want to play? I want to play. So close your eyes. I don't want you to see. I'm not that stupid. And please close your eyes, because you're going to tell him and share the profits or something like this. I want everyone not to look. I don't want anyone to see where I put the money. Don't want anybody to see where I put the money. Okay, Conrad, do you want the cup on the right, the middle, or the left? The left. This cup? Yeah. You sure? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give you an opportunity to change your mind before I open the cup and show you that it's not in the middle one. Do you want to stay or switch? Stay. You want to stay? Yes? Yes. Hey. Don't clap too quickly because he made the wrong decision. Even though he made the wrong decision, it gets very complicated because sometimes we do the wrong decisions and good happens, and sometimes we make mistakes and good things happen. Sometimes we do everything right and things go wrong. That's a different problem I'm not going to talk about in learning. But why did he make a mistake? Very briefly, I explained to you. This is called the Monty Hall dilemma. It's many papers on it. I ask for the money. The money is randomly in cup A, B, or C. And then I say, decide what you want. And he can decide A, B, or C. And if he decides A, B, or C, I ask him for a final choice. Do you want to stay or do you want to switch? And what did everybody do in England and China and Australia and America, everywhere? Everybody stays. And if you stay, I lose money a third of the time. And if you switch, you will, 2/3 of the time. So if the cup was initially in A, and he says A, he wins if he stays. But if it was on B or C, he loses. I don't show a random cup. I never show where the money is. And now I don't want to get into too much details on the Monty Hall. Here the table explaining it. If you want Bayes' statistics theorem, we can compute it. And if you want to read a very long, really boring paper that I wrote on it, a collapsing choice theory, dissociating choice and judgment in decision making. The point is that people stay. We are creatures of habit. We don't like to change because the brain has limited resources. It's not that we're lazy. The brain is a limited machine. It doesn't want to change. And if you want to change people's behavior, it's very, very hard. You go, you can train them, and they learn. And you train them, and they remember. But they go back and do the same thing. You bring GPs, you train them. Here's a better medication, a better treatment. It's better for the patient, and it's cheaper. And they learn. And you ask them, what do you think? Oh, great treatment. And they go and do the old thing again. Time after time, with the whole paper, time to abandon. That's the way we did it all along mentality. This is on drainage of abscess, where they drain abscess like the Middle Ages. There are better ways to do it. We train them, and they do it the old way. I'm going to show you a picture if you don't want to see abscess drained. I don't consider it, but you may consider it gruesome pictures. Don't look. So if you have an abscess in your butt, they're going to drain it like this. Like the Middle Ages. This is how they drained it. And they need to change and do it. You can open your eyes now. and do it in a better way. And it's time and time again. So if you have people, whether they're using people in the till selling with Orange, they did a big project with Orange, how they sell mobile phones, and you want them to sell it a bit differently. Or it's surgeons or pilots or whoever. People don't like to change. People stay, and it's not simple for them to change. We're creatures of habit because the brain has limited resources, right? We don't like to make so much changes. What do they need? They need a kick in the ass. I call it the terror of error, okay? And I apply it in many domains, from working with pilots and police and the medical and forensic in many domains that I work. Kicking the ass, you know, is hard. People get angry from time to time. In some domains, you can do it, for in the military. In other domains, you have to be more subtle about it. But if you want to modify behavior, if you want to go back to the workplace, you have to shake the brain. You have to shake the person. If not, the worst case, they don't change. The best case, they learn. Usually, they don't learn. But if you manage for them to learn, they learn the new skills, soft skill, hard skill knowledge, and they remember it. They go back and did what they did before, health and safety. They go back and do it the way they did it before. Or they're accounting, they do it before. We're creatures of habits. And if you want to really impact behavior, you don't just want them to tick a box. We did diversity training or something. You need to be extreme. You need to shock the system and do something a bit different, right? Yeah, well, why not do it? Well, first of all, you can get injured if you go for extreme. But if you want the big fish, if you want to make big changes, you have to go for the extreme. And then the problem is for it to assimilate it in the memory. So I call it the terror of error. And what is the terror of error? The terror of error is basically give them a memorable experience. Is your e-learning a memorable experience you're going to remember for a long time? Surgeons, you know, you teach them, they're busy in the operating room. She's in the middle of doing it with another patient dying in the other room, and you want her in the middle to remember something you taught them? It's not going to happen unless you give them the right experience. So they notice it, so the brain actually notices. Talking about highly motivated people, you want the brain to notice it and remember it, and that it will impact their behavior. You can do it gradually, you can do it mildly. It doesn't have to be extreme. Let me give you, we have 10 minutes. Probably no time for questions, but I will finish on time. But let me give you an example. I'll start with an example of at home. So you want to teach your kids not to open the door for strangers, right? Telling them, don't open the door for strangers, don't open the door for strangers. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. It's not going to help. I want my kids not to open the door for strangers. I'm going to make it effective. First of all, I feel I have to tell them before I do the terror of error. I say, don't open the door to strangers a million times. Yes, Daddy, you're familiar with that. And then I say to my kids, Daddy is going shopping. I'll be back in 2 hours. Do you remember not to open the door to strangers? Yes, Daddy. I go. I come back after 5 minutes, not 2 hours. I put my hand on the spy hole so they can't see. I knock on the door. Who is it? I don't answer. They're good kids. They don't open the door. Who is it? I don't answer. After a few minutes of me knocking seriously, they can't help themselves. They open the door. And when they open the door, I go, ah! I scare the shit out of them. And you see a tear coming down. And you say, I told you not to open the door for strangers. One experience like this, they will never open the door ever again. That is effective. This is the power of error. The brain is built to encode error. In the olden days, you eat a fruit from the tree and it's good. You need to remember if you eat something or somebody else eats it and they die, you need to remember not to do that. You remember when we used to go on many dates, had lots of fun. I went on 1,000 dates. One of them was bad. The one bad date impacted me more than all the good dates together. In university, I did 1 million exams. I don't even remember except one exam, one question, which I got wrong. This is the one that I remember. So you build it in a way that they learn and have a memorable experience, and it can be subtle, right? In security, people all the time, we teach them, you know, make sure not to leave your laptop hanging around. Don't leave memory sticks hanging around. And then you're the boss, and you go and somebody left a memory stick, and you go and say, what about this? Oh, really? They're not going to code it. What do? You take the memory stick and you put it in your pocket. Let them sweat a bit on it. You want to tell your kids, remember to put your iPhones or the keys in a certain place. Every time they put it somewhere else, they don't remember. Next time, they don't put it where they need to. Take it away. Let them look for it for an hour and think they lost it, and then give it to them. They're going to remember. It's very effective. We use it in small examples. We use it extreme. We use it subtly. And we operate it in the medical domain. There are many, many examples. I'm going to skip about some of the work in the medical domain and how we do this even more effective. OK, let me put this on, and then I'll summarize.
He went to the principal.
So could you please get them to knock it off?
No problem. I got this. Attention, please. Students, attention, please. Ladies, would you please stop putting lipstick prints on the bathroom mirrors? I repeat, ladies, would you please stop putting lipstick prints on the bathroom mirrors? Thank you. Is that good?
Yeah,
Jelly bean?
sure.
What would you guess happened? The number of daily mirror kissings doubled. Elohio spent hours cleaning them off. That's when he got smart. He called a group of the most popular girls in the school, known culprits, down into the lavatory.
Ladies, I'd like to thank you for your time. Every day at the end of the day, I have to go through an unnecessary cleaning process. I'd like to show it to you, and I'm hoping you're willing to help. If you look over here to the mirror, see these lip prints? They're greasy and difficult to get off. I go home late every day because I spend so much time on these mirrors. I'd like to show you what I have to do every day. Every day I do this.
I'm not gonna have it. It's all a matter of engaging the people in a way that impacts.
He went to the principal.
So could you please get them to knock it off?
No problem. I got this.
Sorry about that. It's auto-playing for some reason. Can you cut the volume off?
Attention.
Okay, thank you. Mike is so efficient. Thank you. So, again, you need to think of how to give them the right experience. I have only 4 minutes, so I do want to summarize, and I will not go over time, but I'm happy to hang around if people have questions and want to talk about how the brain works, how we can guide it in a way that our learners don't have their ass in the air, right? Not just throwing material at them and feeling great that you gave them material and it looks great and it looks beautiful and they're great pictures. The question is, can they take it on? Are we guiding attention to the right places when we do the quality of the training? And also the presentation itself, where we can reduce drastically the kind of cognitive load. But you have to be careful, because I've seen many gamifications and gaming in technology, which is great. It can be used to enhance the learning, but often it's great fun, but it doesn't bring the learning. The trick of the game is how can we correctly embed the things, whether it's game, whether it's pictures, in a way that engages the brain, cognitive penetrability, and again, do it with people who sell at stores, customer service, or highly skilled people. And then we want them to change their behavior. That is a complex challenge. I don't expect in 1 hour that we solved all the problem, but I wanted to give you a bit of a taste that you really need to think about the brain. You really need to think about the mind if you want to do real learning. And then you can just learn a few principles of the brain and go over your learning, your design, and think how to use technology, keeping in mind it's not about presenting information. The human mind is not a camera. Don't treat the learner as a passive camera. Thank you very much.